In April 1945, the most advanced jet in the war fell in flames over Bavaria. They were bombing Germany that morning. The pilot bailed out of his plane, parachuted into his mother's garden, had breakfast, and went back to war. This is the story of the man who used his aircraft as a weapon, ramming and colliding with the enemy to tear them apart at full speed. But that morning was not the beginning of the story. It was the end of a problem that had already taken shape in the sky over southern Germany. 8 days earlier, at 8:12 hours, early April 1945, the air above southern Germany already belonged to someone else. Long before German radar stations finished reporting altitude and heading, contrails had spread across the sky in parallel lines, clean and deliberate. The fighting on the ground continued, but it no longer decided outcomes. Yet the decisive movement came from above, arriving on schedule and without resistance. By this stage of the war, Allied air superiority was not debated. It was enforced. The weight of that enforcement fell under the authority of the United States 9th Air Force, whose bombers operated closer to the front, faster and lower than before, methodically erasing what remained of German transport and fuel networks. Rail yards were split apart. Roads vanished. Airfields did not recover between strikes. At the center of these operations flew the B-26 Marauder. Compact, fast, and unforgiving to inexperienced crews, it had matured into a precise instrument by 1945. Its formations were rigid, aircraft spaced so tightly that defensive fire overlapped in every direction. From a distance, the box appeared solid. From closer in, it became lethal. Its approach angles disappeared. Nose guns overlapped with dorsal turrets. Waist gunners tracked movement without hesitation. Tail guns waited, disciplined and patient. The Marauder's speed denied long set-up passes, while its armor absorbed fragments that would cripple lighter fighters. Hesitation was fatal. Persistence was worse. German interceptors learned this in seconds. Propeller-driven fighters struggled to close the distance and were hit before their sights settled. Engines failed. Wings came apart. Pilots died without knowing which gun found them. Even successful passes rarely produced results. The bombers flew on. The fighters fell away. General Adolf Galland watched this imbalance with professional clarity. He understood formations, gunnery arcs, and approach vectors. He also recognized when doctrine no longer offered solutions. And he described the Marauder boxes plainly. They were not brave, they were not elegant, they were nearly impossible to attack. Jets arrived too late and in too few numbers. They climbed quickly but could not linger. Their cannons struck hard, but only briefly. One firing window, sometimes less, before the combined fire answered back. Interceptors died during approach, not retreat. Losses accumulated faster than reports could be written. What formed over Bavaria was a simple asymmetry. One side dictated altitude, timing, and direction. The other reacted, predictably and fatally. The bombers did not need to win dogfights. They only needed to remain intact. Among the men sent to break those formations, the problem acquired a name. They called it a wall of lead. And walls do not negotiate. On the dispersal at Munich-Riem, a rank is visible before skill ever is. Collar tabs mark experience. Flight jackets tell stories. Around the briefing table sit men who have survived Poland, France, Britain, Russia. Colonels with victories counted in dozens. Aces whose names appear in newspapers, whose opinions carry weight well beyond the airfield fence. At the edge of the room was Eduard Schallmoser. His rank is Unteroffizier, a non-commissioned junior, replaceable officer. He neither interrupts nor is asked to speak. In Jagdverband 44, that matters. This is Galland's unit, assembled from what remains of the Luftwaffe's elite. Men who argued with Reichsmarschals and survived it. Men who still command deference even as the Reich collapses around them. Schallmoser has none of that insulation. No decorations to shield him. No political patron. If he disappears tomorrow, it's another name is written on the roster and the day moves on. His aircraft should elevate him. Instead, it marks him as a risk. The Messerschmitt Serschmitt ME-262 sits on the concrete nearby, sleek and unfamiliar even to experienced pilots. It is faster than anything in the sky. It climbs like nothing before it. On paper, it should have changed the war. In practice, it punishes mistakes without warning. Its engines flame out if throttled incorrectly. Its turbines ingest debris from damaged runways and fail on takeoff. Its landing speed leaves no margin for error. Pilots trained on piston aircraft break airframes by instinct alone. Many never make it to combat. The jet does not forgive habits. Even when it works, its armament betrays it. The 30mm cannons are devastating when they fire, but their firing window is brief. The closing speed is too high. A fraction of a second too late, and the target is behind you. A fraction too early, and the rounds fall short. Jams are common. Misfeeds are routine. At jet speed, there is no second pass. Among the senior men, these problems are discussed clinically. Risk is balanced against necessity. Doctrine is refined, then ignored, then refined again. For Schallmoser, the issues are simpler. When the engines quit, he restarts them. When the guns jam, he is still moving at 500 miles per hour toward the enemy. That makes him dangerous, but not in the way the unit values. He is competent without credentials, skilled without authority. He flies the same aircraft as the colonels, yet his margin for failure is thinner. He cannot afford caution. He cannot afford delay. Whilst the jet demands decisiveness, and so does his position within the unit. Around him are men with reputations to protect. Rules written for aircraft that still expect to return home intact. Schallmoser is surrounded by rank, but none of it belongs to him. The climb is steep and uneven, the jet's engines spooling with a delay that never quite feels predictable. Ahead, the bomber formation holds its shape, dark against the thin cloud layer. Schallmoser levels out beneath it, then slides up from below, careful not to bleed speed. This is his first full interception against a heavy formation. The theory has been drilled into him. One pass, short burst, break away. The distance collapses faster than training films ever suggested. He brings the nose up and squeezes the trigger. The 30mm Mk108 cannons cough instead of roar. As their shells leave the barrels slowly by comparison, fat rounds arcing forward while the jet keeps accelerating. The firing window is already closing. At this speed, fractions matter. A blink too long and the geometry is gone. The guns jam. The failure is mechanical, banal, and absolute. No warning light. Not even any dramatic sound. Just silence where recoil should be. And in it, the bomber fills the canopy. He is now inside the defensive envelope. Tracers begin to pass, not yet precise, but close enough to register as intent. He should break away. Doctrine is clear on this point. A clean disengagement preserves aircraft and pilot. A second pass might be possible if the formation loosens. He refused to pull away. Instead, something else forces itself into focus. Not the guns, not the tracers, the speed. The way the bomber's structure seems suddenly fragile when viewed from this angle. Aluminum skin stretched over frames, control surfaces hinged at predictable points, engine nacelles bolted on, not grown. The closing rate is enormous. Even as he reduces throttle, the jet keeps coming. There is no space left for calculation in the abstract, only relative motion, only angles. He sees the tail assembly clearly now. The vertical stabilizer, the horizontal plane. He is not aiming, not yet. He is aligning. The bomber grows larger, then stops growing altogether, frozen for a heartbeat by matched vectors. Rounds strike the jet's nose. Not enough to tear it apart, but enough to register as impact, as consequence. Still, he stays then adjusted slightly, a shallow correction, guided less by training than by instinct sharpened under pressure. This is not a plan. It is recognition. At this speed, mass matters more than firepower. Contact, even brief, would be catastrophic for both aircraft. The bomber's defenses are designed to stop bullets, not 7 tons of jet moving faster than anything built to intercept it. The realization arrives fully formed and then is gone, replaced by action. He snaps the controls away at the last moment, the jet shuddering as it slips past the bomber's tail by a margin too small to measure from the ground. He escapes, barely. The guns remain silent. The formation holds. The bomber continues on its course. Nothing has been achieved in the conventional sense. No kill, no damage report, no victory to claim. But something has broken all the same. Doctrine has failed him at the exact moment it was supposed to work. In its place, and a different understanding has taken hold, born not of theory, but of proximity. He has seen what speed can do without permission, and what structure looks like when stripped of distance. The jet is back on the ground, engines ticking as they cool, the smell of hot metal hanging low over the concrete. Schallmoser does not join the others near the briefing hut. Instead, he stays with the aircraft, walking its length slowly, stopping beneath the wings, then behind the tail. What failed in the air was not courage or aim. It was sequence. At full power, the Meyer-Schmidt Me-262 passes 500 miles per hour without effort. Against piston aircraft, the difference is not incremental. It is absolute. A bomber cruising at less than half that speed cannot evade a closing jet. The only limitation is time. Firepower assumes time. Its cannons assume a stable firing solution. At jet speed, that solution exists for a breath and then disappears. The bomber is no longer ahead. It is already behind. Mass, however, remains. The Meyer-Schmidt Me-262 weighs several tons even before fuel and ammunition. That mass does not need to pierce armor to be effective. It needs only to intersect structure. Bomber airframes are built around predictable load paths. Wings carry lift through spars. Tails transmit control through narrow assemblies. Engine nacelles hang from reinforced mounts designed to hold weight, not absorb lateral shock. The cockpit is not part of this equation. Strike the cockpit, and the closure rate becomes lethal to both aircraft. Human reaction time disappears. There is no exit window. The nose of the jet is not built to survive that kind of contact. The wings and tail are different. A glancing blow at speed produces shear. Aluminum fails along rivet lines. Control surfaces detach. Lift vanishes on one side, then both. The bomber does not explode. It simply stops flying. The jet does not need to remain intact. It needs only to remain controllable long enough. That margin exists, but it is narrow. Bailout requires separation. Separation requires timing. Too early and the jet misses. Too late and the pilot stays with the wreckage. At 500 miles per hour, a second is distance measured in hundreds of meters. The window is counted in heartbeats. This is not penetration. There is no attempt to drive through. The goal is interruption. Break one component and the system fails. He runs the sequence forward, then backward. Closure angle, offset, roll away. Canopy release. Egress. Parachute deployment at low altitude. The math does not forgive error, but it does not forbid success. Others call it madness. The aircraft is too rare. The pilot too valuable. Doctrine exists to prevent exactly this kind of loss. Doctrine also assumes functioning weapons. Schallmoser understands now that the jet's defining feature is not its guns, nor its climb rate, nor its novelty. It is velocity. Velocity removes choice from the opponent. It compresses events until only outcomes remain. In the air, this does not feel heroic or desperate. It feels procedural. The bomber grows. The angle locks. The structure presents itself. The decision arrives after the opportunity has already formed. If it works, the bomber falls away in pieces. If it fails, the jet is lost and the pilot leaves it behind. There is no intention to die here. The exit is part of the design. This is not an act of refusal. It is a substitution. When firepower proves unreliable, mass replaces it. When doctrine cannot keep pace, physics does. The first collision is not announced as an attack. There is no radio call, no warning passed down the line. It happens in a blur of speed south of Munich, where the air is crowded with returning fighters and climbing jets that share the same shrinking sky. A Lockheed P-38. Lightning crosses Schallmoser's path at an angle that leaves no room for correction. The closing speed is extreme. Too extreme for instinct to intervene. Metal meets metal. Not head-on, not squarely, but enough. From the ground it looks like a collision born of chaos. Later reports use that word, accidental, because there is no doctrine to explain what happened next. The P-38 sheds control and falls away. Schallmoser's jet shudders, rolls violently, then steadies. He leaves the aircraft cleanly, parachuting down while the remains of both machines scatter across the countryside. Among pilots, the explanation is simpler. At jet speed, airspace itself becomes dangerous. Proximity is a weapon whether intended or not. What changes things is that Schallmoser returns. He is flying again days later, this time over the Landsberg area on April 16th. The bomber formation ahead is unmistakable. A box of B-26 Marauder aircraft, tight and fast, tracking along a route already stripped of rail lines and fuel dumps. He climbs beneath them, aligns from behind, and closes without firing. This time, there is no ambiguity. The tail of the nearest bomber fills his view, but he holds the line longer than any training manual would allow. At the last moment, the jet's wing clips the rear assembly. The contact is brief, almost delicate in appearance, yet decisive. The bomber loses control immediately, its formation breaking around it as it drops away. Schallmoser rolls inverted, pulls clear, and ejects. His parachute opens low, but in time. He comes down heavy, but alive, while the bomber does not recover. This incident cannot be written off as chance. Within Jagdverband 44, the conversations change. Ground crews stop joking when his aircraft taxis in. Pilots glance toward him during briefings, then away again. No one challenges him openly. No one endorses what he is doing either. There is no category for it. Jets are scarce, pilots more so. The idea that one of them would willingly trade an aircraft for a single bomber unsettles even men who have watched the Luftwaffe bleed itself dry. Yet the results cannot be ignored. 2 enemy aircraft destroyed. 1 pilot walking back to the flight line. The pattern is not discussed in official terms. It moves instead through whispered summaries and careful omissions. He didn't fire. He stayed with it. He always gets out. Schallmoser is no longer dismissed as reckless. Recklessness implies loss of control. What he demonstrates looks closer to certainty. As Germany collapses outward from its cities and inward from its airfields, a quiet reputation forms inside the unit. On April 17, 1945, the bomber stream appears earlier than expected, already deep over southern Germany. High, deliberate, unhurried. The silhouettes resolve into B-17 Flying Fortress aircraft, stacked and steady, their formations stretched but disciplined. Around them, slightly higher and faster, move the escorts. Silver flashes against the sun. P-51 Mustang fighters, loose enough to maneuver, close enough to respond. Schallmoser climbs from below, throttles carefully managed to keep the engines alive. Not rushing the intercept. Rushing invites flameout. Instead, he builds speed, letting the jet do what it does best. The distance compresses. The fortress ahead grows broad and slow, its control surfaces visible, its engines turning steadily, unaware of how little time remains. He lines up from behind and slightly offset. The guns should work this time. They always should. He brings the nose up, steadies the sight, and fires. The cannons stutter. One round leaves the barrel, then nothing. There is no second attempt, no adjustment. The escorts have already begun to drift inward, their paths bending toward him. Tracers arc past the canopy, wide at first, then closer as the range collapses. He is inside the fortress's defensive fire. The air around the jet fills with intersecting lines, not a single threat but many, layered and continuous. The proper response is immediate disengagement. Roll away, dive, preserve the aircraft. The closing speed erases hesitation. He shifts slightly, not to aim, but to align. The bomber's tail assembly presents itself, rigid and exposed. He holds the line until the fortress fills everything ahead of him. The impact is not a crash. It is a tearing. The jet's wing shears through aluminum and control cable, through structure designed to carry load in one direction only. The bomber disassembles in motion. The tail breaks free. One engine departs its mount. The formation fractures as debris scatters through it. Schallmoser pulls away as the jet bucks violently. The aircraft is no longer flyable. He releases the canopy and leaves it behind. The hush after separation is immediate and absolute. Wind rush replaces engine noise. Below him, pieces of the fortress fall out of the sky, trailing smoke and fabric. The escorts break off, their task suddenly irrelevant. There is nothing left to defend. His parachute opens cleanly. He swings beneath it, watching the ground rise with measured calm. He drops down fast, but intact. Once again, he stands up and gathers the silk. This time, there is no confusion about what has happened. The escorts saw the collision. The bomber crews saw it as well. Back at base, the reports no longer hedge. They do not mention accidents. They do not search for alternative explanations. The sequence is too consistent. Guns fail. Jet closes. Aircraft breaks apart. Pilot survives. Within Jagdverband 44, the April 17th mission settles the argument without words. What Schallmoser is doing cannot be dismissed as chance or desperation. It produces the same result under different conditions, against different aircraft, with witnesses on all sides. Luck does not repeat itself like this. The warning is not directed at the enemy. It is delivered to everyone else still trying to fight this war by the rules. On April 20th, 1945. The morning is clear enough to fly and quiet enough to hear the engines long before the aircraft appear, and a formation of B-26 Marauders is already inbound from the west, following a corridor that cuts directly toward southern Germany's remaining transport nodes. Memmingen sits close enough to that line to matter, close enough to be counted. Schallmoser lifts off alone. The jet is uncooperative from the start. One engine lags slightly behind the other. Temperatures climb faster than they should. The runway falls away and the aircraft gains speed, but not smoothly. There will be no second attempt today. Whatever happens will happen on this pass. He climbs beneath the formation, letting the distance close on its own terms. The Marauders maintain their intervals, disciplined and unchanged. Their speed is high for bombers, yet inadequate against a jet that is still accelerating. The numbers are unforgiving. Yet the B-26 cruises just over 280 miles per hour. The Messerschmitt Me-262 passes 500 before the intercept geometry even settles. At that closure rate, 1 second erases more than 200 meters. The defensive fire begins early, stitched across the air ahead of him. It does not slow the approach. There is no time for adjustment, no room for testing the guns. He aligns from slightly below and to the side, angling toward the rear of the nearest aircraft. The tail fills the canopy. The strike is brief and exact. The jet's wing clips the Marauder's tail assembly, not enough to stop the jet outright, more than enough to remove control. The bomber reacts instantly, not with explosion, but with loss. Its tail twists away. One wing dips. The formation breaks around it as the aircraft begins to fall. Schallmoser's jet shudders violently. Warning lights flare, then vanish as systems fail faster than they can register. He pulls away on instinct alone, knowing the aircraft will not respond much longer. The engines spool unevenly, then one quits entirely. He leaves the jet at low altitude. The parachute opens hard, snapping him upright as the remains of the Messerschmitt Me-262 arc away and disappear beyond the edge of town. Somewhere else, metal strikes ground and burns. The sound arrives late and distant. Below him, the bomber continues to come apart. Pieces separate cleanly, then scatter, falling through the same air he now occupies. The formation presses on without it, already adjusting, already moving past the gap. The descent is short. He clears a fence by meters and drops into a garden softened by recent rain. A grass bends under his boots. The parachute collapses around him, the fabric settling as gently as it opened. Then the world resumes at walking pace. No engines, no gunfire. Only the sound of fabric in the grass and distant aircraft receding toward other targets. By 0700 hours, the parachute settles fully now. its silk folding in on itself across the damp grass. Moser stands still for a moment, listening. The bomber and jet are gone. Behind the house, a door opens. His mother is the first to step outside. She does not run or call out. She simply stops, one hand resting against the doorframe, looking at the flight suit, the helmet tucked under his arm, the parachute tangled in the apple branches. For a second, she seems to be counting pieces, as if expecting to find something missing. No one cheers or even speaks, yet he loosens the straps methodically, releasing the harness buckles in the order he was taught. The metal clicks sound loud in the quiet yard. He gathers the silk to one side so it does not drag across the plants, then steps toward the house as though he has arrived on foot. Inside, the kitchen is unchanged. A pot sits on the stove. Bowls are already on the table. The smell of warm grain and milk lingers in the air, ordinary and persistent. Someone has set out bread. Someone has cut fruit. He sits. The chair scrapes softly against the floor. He eats without hurry. The food is neither remarkable nor comforting. It is simply there, and still warm. His hands shake slightly at first, then steady. No one asks what happened. No one needs to. Outside, distant engines pass overhead, faint and uninterested. The war continues without acknowledging the room. He finishes the bowl, rinses it, and sets it aside. He reaches into the pocket of his flight suit and pulls out his watch. The glass is intact. He checks the time, as if confirming something already decided. There is no discussion about whether he will leave. That part is understood. He puts the helmet back on the table, then lifts it again, adjusting the strap out of habit. His mother watches him do this, her expression fixed somewhere between familiarity and disbelief. She smooths the tablecloth where it has folded, a small, unnecessary correction. At the door, he pauses long enough to take his jacket from a hook, not looking back at the garden because he already knows what it looks like. Outside, the parachute lies where it fell, white against the grass. Well, a quiet marker that does not belong to the place. He steps past it, closes the gate, and starts walking toward the road that leads back to the airfield. In less than an hour, he will stand in front of officers who will record the loss of another aircraft. They will note the bomber that did not return. They will ask the same questions they always ask, then move on to the next shortage, the next report, the next problem that cannot be solved. For now, the morning remains intact. Although breakfast is finished, the day continues. At 900 hours, the road back to the airfield is quiet, stripped of traffic and purpose. When Moser arrives, the base looks smaller than it did an hour earlier. Fewer aircraft on the dispersal, fewer mechanics moving between them. The absence is not dramatic, it is administrative. Another Meyer Schmidt ME-262 has been lost. The loss is recorded without ceremony, a serial number written down, a brief description of circumstances. No raised voices, no accusations. There are no replacements waiting in reserve. Engines are missing, fuel is rationed, runways are cratered faster than they can be repaired. What remains of the jet force exists on borrowed time. Inside the operations room, maps are already outdated. Front lines have shifted again overnight. Targets marked in pencil are erased and replaced with nothing. The bombers will return tomorrow, but not in the same strength, not along the same routes. The war has entered a phase where planning lags behind events. Moser reports in. He answers questions directly and without elaboration. A bomber destroyed. Aircraft lost. Pilot returned. Yes, the officer taking notes does not look up when he finishes writing. There is nothing to add. By the afternoon, word circulates quietly that operations are being curtailed. Flights reduced. Aircraft grounded to preserve what little remains. Someone mentions that the unit will likely disperse within days, perhaps sooner. There is no formal announcement. None is needed. Jagdverband 44 was never meant to last. It was assembled as a solution to a problem that outpaced its own creation. Now, with the Reich collapsing in sections rather than all at once, the unit dissolves in the same manner. Pilots leave individually. Aircraft are abandoned where they stand. Orders arrive late or not at all. No medals are issued. There is no citation written for what Schallmoser has done. Ramming is not sanctioned, and it cannot be formalized without admitting failure elsewhere. Official doctrine remains intact on paper, even as it ceases to matter in practice. The reports that survive reduce his actions to damaged aircraft and successful bailouts, stripped of method and intent. In quieter moments, among ground crews and pilots packing their gear, his name surfaces briefly, not as a hero, not as an example to follow, more as a reference point, a reminder of how far things drifted from their starting assumptions. He argued not even for recognition. There is nothing to argue with. The war is ending in fragments, not conclusions. Careers do not close cleanly in such conditions. They simply stop. No jet lift off by evening as the flight line is still. No bombers appear overhead even. The quietness feels provisional, as if waiting for instructions that will never arrive. What Schallmoser did exists in a narrow space between rules and necessity. It does not alter doctrine. It does not change outcomes beyond individual aircraft. It solves nothing beyond the moment it occurs. Yet those moments were real. They happened at speed, under fire, without permission. The war ends without a final flight for him. Eduard Schallmoser survives the collapse intact, in a way few pilots do. There is no capture, no last stand, no dramatic escape west. The shooting stops unevenly, then stops altogether, and he steps out of the uniform into a world already busy forgetting how close it came apart. Nothing he did becomes policy. Ramming remains unofficial, unendorsed, and quietly ignored. No training manual is rewritten. No instructor demonstrates angles or closure rates on a blackboard. The jet age moves forward on cleaner lines, built around missiles, radar, and distance. Speed becomes something to manage, not something to collide with. The aircraft he flew acquires a reputation that has little room for nuance. The Messerschmitt Me-262 is remembered as brilliant but fragile, advanced yet premature. Its engines are recalled for their failures. Its pilots are remembered for what they could not change. In most accounts, the machine remains the story. Schallmoser does not. His name appears only in margins, in loss reports, in footnotes attached to damaged aircraft and unusual outcomes, in recollections that do not always agree on dates or details, but agree on one thing: he walked away more often than expected. What survives is not a record, but a pattern? A jet closes too fast for doctrine. Guns fail. Structure yields. A pilot leaves the aircraft before it finishes falling. The sequence repeats until the war runs out of space for it. There is no moral to extract, no lesson to elevate. What he did does not scale, and it does not pretend to. It exists in the narrow gap between design and use, between what machines are meant to do and what they are forced to do when time disappears. The jet age moves on, smoother and more distant, and the idea of impact gives way to the promise of standoff. Air combat becomes quieter, faster, and less personal. The future chooses precision over proximity. Yet for a brief period at the end of the war, one pilot treated speed as weight and aircraft as objects rather than symbols. He used what the jet could not avoid being: fast, heavy, and unforgiving. His story survives in fragments because fragments are all it ever produced. Not victories, not doctrines, but moments where the expected outcome failed to arrive. A machine remembered for how easily it broke. A pilot remembered, when he is remembered at all, for what he did with it before it did.